If you go back to Trudeau's father, who in 1968-69 started negotiations with the Chinese to recognize communist China. The Americans didn't like the idea at the time, but Trudeau thought that that's where we should go. And we then spent 30 years building this relationship, presidents and prime ministers going back and forth, big constituencies. And Canada was sort of the go-to country on a lot of things. Go-to country on wheat, for example. And we were very much in the discussion. I would say in the last 10 years, our relationship has gone pretty much in the other direction. Probably at exactly the wrong time, because in the last 10 years, China's gone like that in terms of role and influence and weight in the world economy and political system, and our influence has gone like that. So I guess the first thing that has to be reestablished is a sense of stability in the relationships. I mean, the Harper government was hot one day, cold the next, zigzag. We have to reestablish a certain predictability, a certain stability in that relationship. And I think we have to be very realistic. Catherine, China's too big to bully.
Okay.
They aren't going to change because we tell them to change. And they're too old to charm, right? So we're going to have to deal with fact with them. And the fact is that very soon they'll be the world's biggest economy. Even this year, when their economy is not doing well, they're providing 40% of total world growth. And we aren't really part of that
We're not
anymore.
even at the table. The number is 85 billion that we deal with
our
in trade.
Trade has fallen backwards, not gone forward. Our competitors love what Harper did, because they're in there fighting for market share every year. The Germans, the Australians, the Americans. We've got to get back in the game and become credible again for the Chinese. So that's number one.
How do we do that?
Well, I think by reestablishing a dialogue where the Chinese respect what we think and we respect and understand what they think. I think number two, I think a big mistake of the Harper government was not from the beginning to become a member of the AIIB, the Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank. That bank will invest about $4 trillion in infrastructure over the next 10 to 12 years. And we aren't part of it. The UK's part of it, Germany's part. We aren't part of it. To me, that's a no-brainer to get on the inside on that.
How do we get in?
Well, we join. We make an application to join it. The Chinese, I think, are quite open to that. In fact, they've told me they're very open to that. So do other members of the Asian Investment Bank want to see Canada there. But we've got to make that decision. So what if the Americans don't like that decision? What's in our interest? That's what we got to. And, you know, the Americans will play their own game. We've got to play our own game. They're our biggest player. But our second biggest partner, if you look out over the next 20 years, is going to be China, and we're nowhere, and we've got to get somewhere.
In the meetings that the advisory team held, Morneaus' advisory team held this week in Toronto, that you are a part of, was that one of the key topics of conversation?
I'm there as an advisor, so I usually don't discuss in public what I talk about with the people I advise. But I think anyone looking rationally at the situation understands that China's a very big part of our future, and we just have to come to terms with it.
You also talk about, and we've talked about in the past, oil and energy being key and critical to our economy. What needs to happen with that industry here now? Well,
I think we have to be quite realistic. I've noticed people are still talking about huge exports of LNG to Asia. This week, our trading company delivered LNG into Tokyo at $4.80, 1,000 BTU. The Canadian operations need $12.50 to break even. So none of those projects are going to happen anytime soon. So let's get realistic. We have a big feedstock in natural gas. How do we use it? Well, we could use it by creating a big, globally competitive, high-end petrochemical industry instead of just exporting this stuff with no value added. So I think we have to think more in those terms, and I think we have to get over it and start using Canadian oil across the country and build a pipeline
We need
network.
pipelines for that.
We do.
That's difficult to get done, Ken.
You know, a lot of things in life that are important are difficult to get done, but we have to do them. It doesn't mean you don't have to do them. It means you just have to work harder and make them and help people understand. That's the role of leadership, and we have a great communicator as Prime Minister. So you know, that could be one of his big, bold initiatives.
Speaking of communicating and getting things done and things that are hard to do, going back to the relationship with China, Canadians and their viewpoint on China's human rights records, how much of an inhibitor will that be to the relationship and the change in the relationship that we talk about needing to take place?
I think that's an issue. And I think one of the roles of the Prime Minister will be to help Canadians think through those issues. You know, if you look at this in a perspective, if we were to go back to the 1970s in the middle of the Cultural Revolution and compare it to China today, I mean, the progress is just out of this world. You know, in the 1970s, people were being thrown in jail left, right, and center, right? That doesn't, people still get thrown in jail in China today, but it's an incomparably different situation. Private sector today is 70% of GDP. You know, back in the 70s, it was 0% of GDP. So this evolution will continue, but China will have its own system, and we aren't going to fundamentally change that.
How do you think they're going to react to that foreign tax on home buying in Vancouver?
You know, Vancouver isn't the first place to have a tax on foreign buying. Singapore has one, Hong Kong has one, the UK has one. You can't handle this bubble in real estate prices in this country through interest rates. Because we can't raise interest rates, right? So you're going to have to adopt other measures on mortgages, on loan to value. Those things are going to have to, and maybe other people, other cities and other parts of the country will have to do the same. Toronto has a runaway market. And you know, we're just going to have to deal with that and use measures that we haven't used in the past.
Okay. Ken, thank you very much for that.